So think about this for a second. You have Ted Bundy, the handsome, charming law student who was secretly a monster. And then you have Charles Manson, the wild-eyed cult leader who got other people to do his dirty work. I mean, these are two of the most notorious criminals of the last century, but the way they went about their horrific crimes couldn't have been more different. And that right there, that's the puzzle we're going to piece together today.
Here's the thing that'll really bake your noodle. Both of them, Bundy and Manson, were clinically diagnosed as psychopaths. So you gotta ask, right? If they shared the exact same label, why was one a hands-on predator and the other a manipulative puppet master? Clearly, just slapping the word psychopath on them doesn't even begin to tell the whole story.
All right, so here's how we're going to break it all down in this explainer. We're going to start by looking at that mask they both wore so well. Then we'll go beyond the simple label. After that, we'll get to the good stuff. Unmasking Bundy, then unmasking Manson, using a really powerful psychological tool. And finally, we'll put their minds side by side to see what's really going on under the hood.
Okay, first up, the psychopath's mask. We have to get our heads around this idea of the mask of sanity. It's this term that describes a psychopath's incredible ability to seem, well, totally normal. They can be charming, smart, someone you'd trust. But it's all an act. A perfect mask hiding the fact that there's zero empathy and a whole lot of chaos going on inside.
Now, before we can really dig into what made Bundy and Manson so different, we have to talk about what made them so similar. And to do that, we need to look at the one tool that put them both squarely in the same diagnostic box. It's kind of the gold standard for this stuff.
And that tool is called the PCL-R, or the Hare Psychopathy Checklist. Now, this isn't some magazine quiz you can take yourself. No, it's a 20-point checklist that trained clinicians use to score everything about a person, from how they interact with people to their history of antisocial behavior. Honestly, it's the most trusted way we have to diagnose psychopathy.
So on this 40-point scale, there's a magic number, 30. If you score a 30 or higher, well, you officially meet the criteria for being a psychopath. So the big question is, where did Bundy and Manson land on that scale?
And whoa, look at this. It really says it all, doesn't it? Your average criminal offender scores around a 22. But Bundy and Manson, they're way up there, scoring in the high 30s, almost maxing out the scale. We're talking about textbook, top-tier psychopaths here. So the PCL-R confirms it. They definitely share the same diagnosis. Which of course brings us right back to our original puzzle. Why were their crimes so incredibly different?
To get that answer, we've got to go deeper, way deeper, beneath the mask, beyond the PCL-R score. And for that, we turn to the famous Rorschach test. You know, the ink blots. Now, this isn't some old-timey parlor trick. When it's used correctly, it's an incredibly powerful way to map out the hidden corners of a person's mind. So let's start with Ted Bundy.
This quote from the source study just nails it. Bundy's test didn't show some cold, empty void. No, it revealed a mind absolutely churning with pain, with neediness, with all this inner turmoil. And here's the kicker. All of that, it was the fuel for his horrific crimes.
Okay, here we go. This is Bundy's Rorschach Structural Summary. I know, it looks like a crazy spreadsheet full of codes and numbers, but I want you to just think of it as a psychological blueprint, okay? Every single one of these variables tells a part of the story of how his mind worked. Let's break down the big ones.
And what's so fascinating here is how this data tells a story. That high T-score, that measures something called affective hunger, basically a bottomless, desperate need for connection that he could never satisfy. The ratio of his emotional responses, it shows he had almost no control. His feelings were raw and impulsive. Sure, he had that classic narcissistic grandiosity, but underneath it all was a raging storm of inner pain. And that high S score points to this deep, chronic anger just simmering below the surface. This guy wasn't cold and empty. He was boiling over with this toxic stew of need, rage, and agony.
All right, so that's Bundy, a complex, tormented, and, well, fueled inner world. So what happens when we use that same exact tool on Charles Manson? If Bundy was a hurricane of inner turmoil, what on earth did the Rorschach find inside the mind that launched the Manson family? Wow, the contrast just hits you like a truck, doesn't it? The key words here are emptiness, deterioration, and psychosis. Where Bundy's Rorschach showed a complex inner world that fueled his violence, Manson's paints a picture of a mind that was literally falling apart. It was essentially hollow.
So here's Manson's summary, taken when he was much older. And again, it's a map of his psyche. Just a quick look and you can see this is a very, very different profile from Bundy's. Let's zoom in on what these numbers are really telling us.
The big one here, the absolute game changer, is his X- % score. That's a measure of how well you can tell what's real from what's not. His score of .50, that points to a full-blown psychotic break. He simply could not tell the difference between his own twisted fantasies and the real world. His score for disorganized thinking is off the charts. And unlike Bundy, any grandiosity he might have had was gone, completely failed. He was effectively empty. So what was left? Pretty much just a mind run by raw, primitive urges, with none of that complex inner turmoil we saw in Bundy.
So we've unmasked them both. Bundy, who was filled with his agonizingly complex inner life, and Manson, whose mind was just characterized by emptiness and psychotic decay. Okay, let's put them side by side for the final comparison and see how this all comes together. And this is it. This is the absolute core of the whole thing. Bundy's violence was fueled by what was going on inside him, his rage, his pain, his twisted needs. It was personal. Manson's violence, on the other hand, was just an extension of an empty, psychotic mind. He didn't need any complex fuel. His followers were just the tools he used to act out his chaotic, primitive impulses. And look at this. The hard data makes it plain as day. Reality testing. Bundy's was bad, but Manson's was completely psychotic. Grandiosity. Bundy had it. Manson had zero left. That effective hunger, that deep, achy neediness, through the roof for Bundy, non-existent for Manson. Distorted thinking. Bundy's thoughts were actually pretty organized, all things considered, while Manson's were just a mess. The numbers don't lie. They were fundamentally different kinds of monsters, wearing a similar mask.
So, what's the big takeaway from all this? Why does digging into this level of psychological detail even matter? Well, it really shows us the true power of a tool like the Rorschach, especially when you're trying to understand the most dangerous minds out there.
And this really gets to the heart of it. A label like psychopath tells you what someone is. It puts them in a box, but it doesn't tell you why they do the things they do. The Rorschach goes deeper. It helps explain the unique psychological fuel and the specific internal pathways that lead to violence. It's like finding the personal signature of their evil. This last quote from the study just wraps it all up perfectly. Heterogeneity. It's a fancy word, but all it means is diversity. Even among people who score exactly the same on the psychopath checklist, their inner worlds can be totally, fundamentally different. The mask might look identical, but what's hiding underneath is always unique. And this whole comparison just forces us to ask a much bigger question, doesn't it? If two of the most infamous, most studied criminals in modern history are this different under the surface, it really makes you wonder, what else is hiding beneath the masks we think we understand?